Holy shit, I just got my hair cut, and my god, now do I not only not look like Rock Lee, but it's like I took off that weighted training gear he wears. I can see the universe more clearly now, like the hair is no longer covering my third eye and it's finally open. But instead of solving global issues or getting my life in order, I decided to think about Warhammer lore with it. Now I think I'll start this upcoming rant with a disclaimer. I know why everything I'm about to say hasn't, isn't, and will not happen. Because Games Workshop is to Space Marine cock what a vacuum cleaner is to a dirty carpet, just non-stop sucking. As the saying goes, if it isn't humanity, it isn't turning a profit. But that being said, those knife-eared bastards on the craft world should be the ones making just about all the major plays going forward. Eldred's little clusterfuck summoning the god of the dead halfway shouldn't be a rare moment of forward momentum for the elves, it should be business as usual. Here's why in a universe where GW prioritizes logical storytelling first instead of a distant third to money and being an asshole, the Eldar would either be the protagonist faction or at least be doing a lot more important stuff than they are now. Reason 1, the craft world Eldar are pretty much the only faction with the means to properly carry things out like this in terms of military. And before you shit a brick of adamantite, I'm fully aware that if you put every Eldar on one side of a battlefield and every bit of the Imperium's military on the other, the elves would swiftly go from a dying race to a very, very dead one. But the thing is, the Imperium can never do anything like that. It's constantly under siege by threats that in theory they would be able to handle if it was just that one threat alone. With the exception of maybe the Necrons and the Tyranids, the Imperium would win in the above situation every time. Even then, they'd probably cripple the Necrons and the Tyranids if that did happen. If they could properly mobilize against the Tau, they'd crush the Blueies. If they could focus on culling the Orcs, they would have a much easier time dealing with them. Same for the Dark Eldar in my opinion. But they can never do that because leaving to take on one of those threats means exposing themselves to the 1,000 other ones they have. They're stuck putting out so many fires they can't even properly extinguish them. They just have to go, yeah, it's good enough to ignore now, and focus on the next most pressing issue. The Eldar, though, don't have that issue. In terms of forces they can bring to bear in a single location relative to their total might, the craft worlds probably have the most significant amount of forces available. Because of the fact that they rarely war with each other and have the same overall goal, not being forever molested by Slaanesh, cooperation between multiple armies is much more feasible. Combine that with the fact that their homes are also massive fucking ships, and they can strike in full force wherever they wish. It's risky, sure, but they get the benefit of their entire faction's might behind them, coupled with the fact they don't have to deal with any kind of supply line like the Imperium does. And that's before we get into the bullshit they can pull with the Webway. Combine this with the fact that they can bolster their ranks with the dead via Wraith units and have the most prolific Psykers in the galaxy, and you've got yourself a faction that only loses because its enemies have more plot armor than actual armor. Reason 2, they have the motivation for it. Yep. Everyone in the setting has the motivation for their goals to some extent, so I get why this might seem like a weaker point. The Sisters of Battle are so fanatical they put actual real-life Crusaders to shame, especially that fourth one that happened. And the Inquisition are a bit ruthless in carrying out their goals in the same way the Nazi SS was a bit cruel. But the Eldar take it further. Their entire race is haunted by the fact that when they die, it's off to the worst possible fate for them.
Death! By snoo-snoo!
You can't really get away from that in a meaningful way. A soul stone is basically purgatory, and an infinity circuit on a craft world is purgatory you share with friends. Yeah, it could be worse, but it isn't good, it's just not awful. When humans die, assuming they aren't chaotic, they either fade back into the warp or join with the Emperor in death to wage holy war forever. Not necessarily pleasant, but for an empire of religiously motivated fanatics, this isn't the worst fate in the world by far. And if they are chaotic, most of them in life probably don't assume they're going to be chow food for demons, so they don't have that motivation like the Eldar. Orcs just get recycled into more orcs when they die, so arguably it doesn't even count as dying. The average Tyranid doesn't even have the capacity to conceptualize death. I mean, come on, you shouldn't really even be factoring them in here. The craft worlds are the only ones to have a fate awful enough, as well as a situation tenuous enough that they would want to take some drastic and story-changing measures to save themselves. Whether it be Iliad, desperately trying to free Isha, or whatever else they can do to stave off extinction. And speaking of those two, the Eldar are the only ones with gods actively pushing towards goals. Before you mail me Anthrax, hang on. I'm aware the Emperor was fighting chaos in the war, the Chaos Gods are all sending out demons to cause whatever sort of shit, and Gork and Mork are just beating the ever-loving hell out of each other and whatever beings they trip over. But how often do these gods actually do something actively themselves? Using the Emperor for the main example, the Astronomicon is like a passive buff that Emps is just kinda charging like a battery. And yeah, fighting demons in the warp is in theory an active thing to do, but it's more of a tell-don't-show kind of deal in practice. The Emperor fights day and night to keep the vile demons out of our world. Don't think about how they regularly get in the building aliens anyway. But the Eldar gods? Isha's the reason the Eldar have their soul condoms by crying over and over, so not the most dignified of assistants, but it still counts in a practical way. Kegarak, I think that's how you actually say it, is playing a game so goddamn complex that even Zinch isn't sure what's going on. Iniad is actively running around, and while GW is only giving the Ynnari so much love with him merely being partially awake, he's still a god who's preparing to start unleashing some major havoc and can step foot onto the battlefield. And while yes, the Avatar of Cain is a total meme by this point, you still don't want to be on the receiving end of its sword. And an Eldar that permanently transforms into Super Saiyan Cain now exists, so the bloody-handed god still makes sure you know he's not out of it yet. Also, come on, I don't see any of the other factions having a god with as metal a name as the Bloody-Handed. Seriously, should be the most powerful deity on that basis alone. That name kicks ass. Thanks for enduring this little rant. If you enjoyed, then I'm glad. If not, and everything I've said makes you quiver with rage, then I'm sorry and I hope you'll still stick around, you little Emperor fanboy you. Thanks for watching. Take care out there.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?